So most of the alcohol gets metabolized by the alcohol dehydrogenase. Various isoforms exist for this enzyme, namely ADH1, 2, and 3, of which one is the most important type, and this is the one which has got a high affinity for low concentration of alcohol. So we must remember that alcohol follows zero order kinetics. So that means regardless of how much alcohol you drink, it will be metabolized at a constant rate. However, this is only a part of the truth. People who are used to taking alcohol in huge amounts, they start following the first order kinetics. That means the alcohol metabolism gets governed by the alcohol concentration in the blood. And these are also the subjects in whom the MEOS gets induced, which is the endoplasmic reticulum pathway. Now, there are two distinct differences. Like I said, bulk of the metabolism occurs by ADH, part of the metabolism occurs by the endoplasmic reticulum. Please note that in the cytosolic part of the enzyme, it is the NAD which gets converted to NADH. So you have an effective NADH to NAD ratio which gets increased. And in the MEOS, you have the NADPH which is getting converted to NADP. Now, this is a very important cofactor for the synthesis of nucleic acid, whereas the NADH NAD ratio is extremely important for the other metabolic pathways like the glycolytic pathway, like the tricarboxylic acid pathway, like accumulation of lactate in patients with alcohol related liver disease, and then also it impairs neoglucogenesis. So that is also the reason why patients who take alcohol in hazardous amounts frequently develop hypoglycemia. And lastly, the occurrence of the fatty liver, which is again because acetaldehyde gets converted to acetate. This step occurs in the mitochondria. In the mitochondria, again, you have got more NADH than NAD. Because you have got more NADH than NAD, therefore the Krebs cycle gets inhibited because the malate cannot get converted to oxaloacetate. For this step, you need more NAD than NADH. So because the NADH to NAD ratio is reversed, therefore the Krebs cycle also gets inhibited. So glycolytic pathway gets inhibited. Pyruvate preferentially gets converted to lactate because lactate dehydrogenase uses the NADH. So that is one step in the glycolytic pathway, which is not the preferred route. So pyruvate should ideally get converted to acetyl coenzyme A through pyruvate dehydrogenase. That particular step needs more NAD. However, because in the cytosol more NADH is present, so the pyruvate gets preferentially converted to lactate, and therefore you see hyperlactatemia in patients with alcohol use disorder. What about the gluconeogenesis? Again, there is a shift that the phosphoenol pyruvate pathway gets affected because of the reversed NADH to NAD ratio. So these are the various reasons because of which the other pathways in the body they get affected. Now, what is it doing to the energy kinetics? That is the next important reason why there is toxicity to hepatocytes. So, what happens to acetate? So, acetate is a funny molecule. It's a mutagen. It's a carcinogen. It is responsible for the side effects that people have, which is described as the hangover. So, acetate will get converted into acetyl coenzyme A. Now, this particular step again uses ATP. So, on one hand, you have impaired Krebs cycle. On the other hand, you have got more NADH in the mitochondria, reversing the occurrence of smooth passage of Krebs cycle, and then you are using up the ATP. So that means the cell goes into a negative energy balance. So acetate to acetyl coenzyme A uses up a molecule of ATP. So again, this is something which the body does not need. So this particular metabolic pathways tell you that there is a reversal of the redox potential and you are using up NADPH, which is very crucial for synthesis of nucleic acid. Now let us go to the extreme left, which is the peroxidase pathway. Very minor pathway, accounts for less than 2% of alcohol metabolism, but mind you, it uses the enzyme catalase. Again, the product formed is the same. It is acetaldehyde, but it uses up catalase. What is catalase? That is an antioxidant mechanism that you have. So H2O2 is used up along with the ethanol to form again acetaldehyde, but you are using up a very important enzyme that you could otherwise have used for the oxidant stress. The other peculiar thing is that in the peroxisomal pathway as well as the ER pathway, you have generation of ROS. So these are the two steps in alcohol metabolism where you get ROS generated, and that is what perpetrates the injury. So this is again what I have tried to describe: impaired redox potential, impaired energy kinetics, impaired glycolysis, impaired TCA cycle, impaired mucoglucogenesis, increased lactate, increased NADH to NAD ratio, and then also you are using up ATP. Now, what happens to this NADH? This is a fully molecule. The NADH that is present in the cytosol that is pushed towards the mitochondria when there is an excess of NADH in the cytosol. Now, this particular phenomena leads to a leakiness of the electron transport chain. So, on one hand, you have a faltering TCA cycle because of which the NADH generation in the mitochondrial matrix comes down. On the other hand, you have got NADH coming from an exogenous source, which is the cytosol, which is then producing a lock or leakiness of the electron transport chain. So again, your energy generation goes down. So this summarizes the toxicity of alcohol to the hepatocyte. In fact, in the human body, there is always an attempt to conserve as much energy as the body can possibly do, or the tissues or organelles can possibly do. And if that does not happen, the tissues undergo serious damage. So, what are the effects of alcohol on the antioxidase pathway? I already told you that you are using one particular thing, converts H2O2 to H2O. So, even though alcohol increases the catalase activity, but it is also using it up. But what about the other things? So, copper zinc superoxide dismutase, again, all the pathways which are used to counter the ROS in the human beings, those are being affected negatively by the consumption of alcohol. Similarly with manganese SOD. And then glutathione reductase. So glutathione is the most abundant antioxidant in the human liver, and you need it in the reduced form. And this particular alcohol consumption on a chronic basis, that leads to the decreased activity of glutathione. So this also gets translated into various attempts to treat these patients, albeit not always successfully, by giving them betaine or SAMe. When you are using these two molecules, then you effectively think that you are going to be able to generate reduced glutathione. So these are the steps which already Dr. Anil has alluded to. Just to tell you that you have a number of pathways because of which the fat synthesis occurs. So only thing to mention is that when you have got acetyl coenzyme A formed, two molecules of acetyl coenzyme A will give you acetoacetyl coenzyme A. One more molecule of acetyl coenzyme A will give you malonyl coenzyme A. Once the malonyl coenzyme A is formed, that is commitment on the cellular pathways to go on to form fatty acid chains. So this is called the fatty acid synthesis. So malonyl coenzyme A is the most important step. As soon as the malonyl coenzyme A is formed because of increased acetyl coenzyme A, it inhibits what is called as the CPT1. CPT1 is what introduces the fatty acids into the mitochondria to cause their beta oxidation. So this is carnitine palmitoyl transferase 1. So this is the most important reason why you get an impaired beta oxidation of fatty acid and a commitment to long chain fatty acid synthesis. And then Sir has eloquently spoken about the SREP as well as the PPR alpha. So these are the pathways of injury leading into ASH. And again, the most important thing over here is the formation of the inflammasome. So inflammasome forms from the cytosolic receptors. These are the nod receptors. These receptors, when they have got pyridine or caspase attached to it, they break down the pro interleukin 18. So that is the most important thing to remember. So you know that in histology of ALK patients, you have neutrophils entering into the liver. So where do the neutrophils come from? So these neutrophils come from the breakdown of the pro interleukin 18 into interleukin 18. And then subsequently, you have got other complements and chemokines also being released. Simultaneously, because of the adduct formation, you get the adaptive immunity. So the first step is the innate immunity, which is mainly the antigen presenting cells and the neutrophils and the macrophages. And the second step is the adaptive immunity, which is because of the neoantigen formation. So acetaldehyde, it breaks down the DNA, it breaks down the mitochondria, forms fresh proteins, and antibodies are generated against these proteins because they are actually neoantigens for the liver. And these protein adducts, they go on to stay in the human host even beyond the consumption of alcohol. So oftentimes you have heard the patient saying that I have given up on alcohol, but my liver injury is relentlessly progressive. So this is what we must tell our patients right at the outset. You have got increased ROS in the form of malondialdehyde and 4-hydroxynonenal. This also forms certain adducts which are also potentially carcinogenic. And this is the activation of the stellate cell which lays down the matrix. So you have got an increase in the TIMP, a decrease in the matrix metalloproteinases, and laying down of the fibrous tissue, which is mature collagen or collagen 1. and this forms the basis of the stage of fibrosis. So please remember, patients with ALK-HEP, when you measure what you think is burnt out cirrhosis, will have ASH. This is the step of the carcinogenesis, and the extreme right form of the slide is what is important. So this is the damage done to the DNA, and this is what leads to carcinogen. But please remember, acetaldehyde by itself is a mutagen as well as a carcinogen. So to summarize, the earlier studies of alcohol injury to the liver focused only on malnutrition. So for many years, till such time Leiber described in medical students that they could be fed alcohol, biopsied, taken away from alcohol, and the biopsy would reverse. It was always thought that this is only a game of malnutrition and you are taking away the other nutrients, or abnormal methionine metabolism, or due to oxidative stress due to GSSH depletion, or Kupffer cell activation by LPS. But now we know this is an extremely complex area. There is involvement of the signaling pathways by TLR, by node-like receptors, then downstream factors, which are the activator proteins, kinases, and then transcription factors. There is a distinct role of complement, interferons, chemokines. There is genetic and epigenetic modifications, miRNAs, and stem cells also involved in perpetrating the injury. We still do not have prediction models for disease causation. So this question has already been asked a few times, how to tell who's going to develop disease and who's not going to develop. So the prediction models still are not existing. But the worst thing for us clinicians is that there is so much amount of research that has gone, but it has not related into any translational benefit. So the audience might be surprised to see that when you have used apoptosis signal kinase inhibitors, they have not worked. When you have used pan caspase inhibitors, they have not worked. So this is still an open area wherein you cannot say that if X is the pathway responsible for pathophysiology, I can counter it by giving it anti-X. It probably does not work in the context of alcohol-related liver disease, because I think there is a redundancy of pathways which produce injury. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Dharmesh. I think both of you and Anil would now see that you spoke the same topic with a lot of stress. And one of this one is that this is a question which is both in DM and DNB theory. What is the pathogenesis of alcoholic liver injury? I'm sure you made certain very important points like, the inflammation and leading to slowly, the other sequential changes. But your point is well noted that 70% and 40% showing changes in an explant liver and alcoholic liver disease. Now, I have two people to make quick comments, is Dr. Muthuswamy and Dr. Manish on this topic. Could you make one comment, please, as panelists? Manisha?
Dharmesh, can you stop sharing the slide?
Sure, sir.
Dr. Manisha is there? I saw her actually some time back. If Dr.
There's some storm in Allahabad, so that's why she just
Muthuswamy can comment. He is there as a panelist.
I'm here. Yes. Thanks, Professor Anil Arora and Dr. Dharmesh Kapoor. Wonderful lecture. Just gives you a whole overview of what happens in the liver. When you take alcohol, you just went through the macroscopic to microscopic. Dharmesh went into the enzyme pathways relating to liver damage. But I was so fascinated by the fact that you continue to stress upon the fact that once you stop drinking alcohol, it is not the end of liver disease. That's what I keep stressing the patients, that you stop drinking, you expect that your liver should go back to normal even at a certain stage, which does not happen. As Dharmesh rightly pointed out, that the adducts continue to form, and there are things that can go on to continue to produce liver disease even after stopping drinking. My one question to Dr. Dharmesh is there something that you can say that this process, where you say that it continues to cause liver damage, is there any specific period you can say that this is not going to happen? Or are there patients where you can say by stopping alcohol, you will not have additional damage?
That's a super question, sir. So I think the timelines set for this are anywhere between 8 to 12 weeks, though one cannot be very dogmatic about this. And what exactly does one mean by it? So the important thing to say is that when you stop taking alcohol, in the first few days to weeks, the injury continues to worsen, because when the person is actively abusing alcohol, it forms as a good calorie base for him. So we all know that alcohol gives you about say 7 kcals per gram. And because these people generally come to you when they have already reached a stage of severe alcohol, they become very terribly anorectic. So the caloric supply that was coming from alcohol, even that has been curtailed. So the first 10 to 14 days are the worst for these patients. So when would I tell my patient that yes, now he can go off the radar? That would generally be after 8 to 12 weeks. And what does that imply in objective numbers? So if this patient had presented with decompensation, you should start to see reversal of that, improvement in the renal function, improvement in the coagulopathy, which is by way of the INR, still the traditional way of checking that, improvement in the sodium, which must come down to normal, because oftentimes you see people who are extremely sick and they present with decompensation or early stages of ACLF. Bilirubin downtrend. So to imagine that the bilirubin will touch to normal, which is less than 1 in a patient who's presented to you with severe ALCAP, that is odd. So that is why when you see the trials of severe ALCAP, they all tell you that you should not have given up on alcohol more than 30 to 60 days ago, and the bilirubin cutoff in that is earlier 3, now 5. So that is the logic behind this. So it takes roughly about 8 to 12 weeks for normalcy to be restored.
Sorry.
After 12 weeks, this doesn't happen. The progress does not happen. Would you be confident that the damage will not continue to happen after 12 weeks?
So that is again a super question. So we all know from trials of therapy in severe ALCAP that they die because of recidivism. So we never treat it as a twin disorder. So we always treat it what meets our eye. So the people, so that is why corticosteroid or any other therapy which has been used in this disorder has not shown long-term benefit. The only long-term benefit accrues from abstinence. And that is extremely difficult to achieve in this cohort of patients. In fact, the STOPA trial showed that 60% of patients were drinking at the end of 1 year. So these were patients who were being constantly monitored because that was the end point of this study. So mortality at 1 year. This was a wonderful study which got published in NEJM a few years ago. And it showed that at the end of 1 year, about 60% patients were drinking.
I agree with Professor Dharmesh, but I think there would be small change in Indian scenario. And I also want to tickle you by saying that there would be some role of newer drugs, which maybe like we never know that IL-6 inhibitors have such a anti-inflammatory action. Maybe something like that will get opened up in future.
So IL-6 is protective in the context of alcohol-related injury. So you should not be using the antagonist. So we didn't discuss this because of paucity of time. As the injury is occurring, there is also concurrent pathways to restore regeneration in the liver. So that is also one of the reasons why you asked right at the beginning why some people develop significant damage and others don't. So these are the pathways that we don't oftentimes talk about. So as the injury is progressing, there are also counter mechanisms which would thwart this injury. And IL-6 is one such mechanism.
I think that's what I wanted you to say. Maybe drugs like tofacitinib, these are all imagination. Sorry about it. I think Gurunath will take over and have Ramesh Ruparai back into the window.
Yeah, sure. There are a few questions from the audience, but if time permits, we will definitely take. Yeah. So I request Ms. Dhanashree for to commence the Manthan 2 virtual book launch.
Yes. So before we goes into the Manthan 2020 book launch, I just wanted to share the memento what we created for all the speakers. It's the Manthan, the one small memento or the token of appreciation we have created for the Manthan, and it will reach you through our managers who is working in the respective cities. So with this, as we started Manthan in 2019, where our main objective is to transfer the concepts into the clinical practice, and that's how after 2019 we have taken this project ahead in 2021. And I'm sure the engrossing scientific deliberation added speaks. And before we goes into the second half of the Manthan 2021, would like to take this opportunity of the virtual book launch, which we have planned in the print publications, and where are all the participant speakers who has participated in Manthan 2020. They have written the chapters on each subject, and that's how this beautiful book has come. And to launch this book on virtual platform, we have the senior faculty, Dr. Ruparai sir. It's our honor to have you, sir, here for this virtual book launch. And I'm sure this scientific platform will continue, and your blessings will be there. And this will be definitely helping to all these gastros and the PG students to upgrade their knowledge, sir. With this, I request our technical support teams to launch the virtual book launch video with the hand of Dr. Rutrai, sir. Thank you so much.